Chapter 7. The very day of Mr. Elton's going to London produced a fresh occasion for Emma's services toward her friend. Harriet had been at Hartfield as usual soon after breakfast, and after a little time had gone home to return again to dinner. She returned, and sooner than had been talked of, and with an agitated, hurried look, announcing something extraordinary to have happened while she was longing to tell. Half a minute brought it all out. She had heard, as soon as she got back to Mrs. Goddard's, that Mr. Martin had been there an hour before. Finding that she was not at home, not particularly expected, had left a little parcel for her from one of his sisters, and had gone away. On opening this parcel, she had actually found, besides 2 songs which he had lent Elizabeth to copy, a letter to herself, and this letter was from Mr. Martin, and concerned a direct proposal of marriage. Who could have thought it? She was so surprised she did not know what to do. Yes, quite a proposal of marriage, and a very good letter. At least she thought so. And he wrote as if he really loved her very much, but she did not know, and so she was come as fast as she could to Miss Woodhouse what she should do. Emma was half ashamed of her friend for seeming so pleased and so doubtful. "Upon my word," she cried, "the young man is determined not to lose anything for want of asking. He will conduct himself well if he can." "Will you read the letter?" cried Harriet. "Pray do. I'll rather you would." Emma was not sorry to be pressed. She read and was surprised. The style of the letter was very much above her expectation. There were not merely no grammatical errors, but as the composition it would not have disgraced a gentleman. The language, though plain, was strong and unaffected, and the sentiments it conveyed very much to the credit of the writer. It was short, but expressed good sense, warm attachment, liberality, propriety, even delicacy of feeling. She paused over it while Harriet stood anxiously watching for her opinion, with a well, and was at last forced to add, "Is it a good letter, or is it too short?" "Yes, indeed, a very good letter," replied Emma rather slowly. "So good a letter, Harriet, that everything considered, I think that one of his sisters must have helped him. I can hardly imagine the young man whom I saw talking with you the other day could express himself so well, if left quite to his own powers. And yet it is not the style of a woman. No, certainly it is too strong and concise, not diffuse enough for a woman. No doubt he is a sensible man, and I suppose may have a natural talent thinks strongly and clearly, and when he takes a pen in hand, his thoughts naturally find proper words. It is so with some men. Yes, I understand the sort of mind, vigorous, decided, with sentiments to a certain point, not coarse. A better written letter, Harriet, returning it, than I had expected." "Well," said the still waiting Harriet. "Well, and what should I do?" "What should you do? In what respect? What do you mean in regard to this letter?" "Yes? But are you in doubt of it? You must answer it, of course, and speedily." "Yes, but what shall I say? Dear Miss Woodhouse, do advise me." "Oh, no, the letter had much better be all your own. You will express yourself very properly, I am sure. There is no danger of your not being intelligible, which is the first thing. Your meaning must be unequivocal, no doubts or demurs, and such expression of gratitude and concern for the pain you are inflicting as propriety requires, will present themselves unbidden to your mind. I am persuaded you need not be prompted to write the appearance of sorrow for his disappointment." "You think I ought to refuse him, then?" said Harriet, looking down. "Ought to refuse him? My dear Harriet, what do you mean? Are you in any doubt as to that? But I beg your pardon. Perhaps I have been under a mistake. I have certainly been misunderstanding you, if you felt in doubt as to the purport of your answer. I had imagined you were consulting me only as to the wording of it." Harriet was silent. With a little reserve of manner, Emma continued, "You mean to return a favorable answer, I collect." "No, I do not. That is, I do not mean— What should I do?" "What would you advise me to do? Pray, dear Miss Woodhouse, tell me what I ought to do." I shall not give you any advice, Harriet. I will have nothing to do with it. This is a point with which you must settle your feelings." "I had no notion that he liked me so much," said Harriet, contemplating the letter. For a little while Emma persevered in her silence, but began to apprehend the bewitching flattery of the letter might be too powerful. She thought it best to say, "I lay it down as a general rule, Harriet, that if a woman doubts as to whether she should accept a man or not, she certainly ought to refuse him. If she can hesitate as to yes, she ought to say no directly. It is not a state to be safely entered into with doubtful feelings, with half a heart. I thought it my duty as a friend and older than yourself to say such to you, but do not imagine that I want to influence you. Oh no, I am sure you are a great deal too kind to. But if you just advise me what I had best do. No, no, I don't mean that. As you say, one's mind ought to be quite made up. One should not be hesitating. It is a very serious thing. It would be safer to say no, perhaps. Do you think I had better say no? Not for the world, said Emma, smiling graciously. I would advise you either way. You must be the best judge of your own happiness. If you prefer Mr. Martin to every other person, if you think him the most agreeable man you have ever been in company with, why should you hesitate? You blush, Harriet. Does anybody else occur to you in this moment under such a definition? Harriet, do not deceive yourself. Do not run away by gratitude and compassion. At this moment, whom were you thinking of? The symptoms were favorable. Instead of answering, Harriet turned away confused and stood thoughtfully by the fire. And though the letter was still in her hand, it was now mechanically twisted about without regard. Emma awaited the result with impatience, but not without strong hopes. At last, with some hesitation, Harriet said, Miss Woodhouse, as you will not give me your opinion, I must do as well as I can by myself. And I have now quite determined and really almost made up my mind to refuse Mr. Martin. Do you think I am right? Perfectly right. Perfectly right, my dearest Harriet. You are doing just what you ought. While you were at all in suspense, I kept my feelings to myself, but now that you are so completely decided, I have no hesitation in approving. Dear Harriet, I give myself joy at this. It would have grieved me to lose your acquaintance, which must have been given the consequence of your marrying Mr. Martin. While you were in the smallest degree wavering, I said nothing about it because I would not influence. But it would have been the loss of a friend to me. I could not have visited Mrs. Robert Martin of Abbey Mill Farm. Now I am secure of you forever. Harriet had not surmised her own danger, but the idea of it struck her forcibly. You could not have visited me, she cried, looking aghast. Not to be sure you could not, but I never thought of that before. That would have been too dreadful. What an escape. Dear Miss Woodhouse, I would not have the pleasure and honor of being intimate with you for anything in the world. Indeed, Harriet, it would have been a severe pang to lose you, but it must have been. You would have thrown yourself out of all good society. I must have given up on you. Dear me, how should I ever have borne it? It would have killed me to never come to Hartfield any more. Dear affectionate creature, you banished to Abbey Mill Farm, you confined to the society of the illiterate and vulgar all your life. I wonder how the young man could have assurance to ask it. He must have a pretty good opinion of himself. I do not think he is conceited either in general, said Harriet, her conscience opposing such a censure. At least he is very good-natured. I shall always feel much obliged to him and have a great regard for. But this is quite a different thing from, and, he may like, it does not follow that I should, and certainly, I must confess that since my visiting here I've seen people, and if one comes to compare them, person and manners, there is no comparison at all. One is so very handsome and agreeable. However, I do really think Mr. Martin a very amiable young man, and have a great opinion of him, and his being so much attached to me, and his writing such a letter. But as to leaving you, it is what I would not do upon any consideration. Thank you, my own sweet little friend. You will not be parted. A woman is not to marry a man merely because she is asked, or because he is attached to her, and can write a tolerable letter. Oh no, it is but too short a letter, too. Emma felt the bad taste of her friend, but let it pass with a very true, and it would be a small consolation to her for the clownish manner which might have offended her every hour of the day to know that her husband could not write a good letter. Oh, yes, very. Nobody cares for a letter. The thing is to always be happy with pleasant companions. I am quite determined to refuse him, but how shall I do? What shall I say? Emma assured her that there would be no difficulty in the answer, and advised it being written directly, which was agreed to, in the hope of her assistance, and though Emma continued to protest against any assistance being wanted, It was, in fact, given in the formation of every sentence. The looking over of this letter again and replying to it had such a softening tendency that it was particularly necessary to brace her up with a few decisive expressions. And she was so very much concerned at the idea of making him unhappy, and the thought so much of what his mother and sisters would think and say, and was so anxious that they should not fancy her ungrateful, that Emma believed if the young man had come in her way at that moment, he would have been accepted after all. This letter, however, was written and sealed and sent. The business was finished and Harriet safe. She was rather low all the evening, but Emma could allow for her amiable regrets, and sometimes relieve them by speaking of her own affection, sometimes by bringing forward the idea of Mr. Elton. "I shall never be invited to Abbey Mill again," was it said in a rather sorrowful tone. "Nor if you were, could I ever bear to part with you, my Harriet. You are a great deal too necessary at Hartfield to be spared to Abbey Mill. And I am sure I should never want to go there, for I am never happy but at Hartfield." Some time afterward it was, "I think Mrs. Goddard would be very much surprised if she knew what had happened. I'm sure Miss Nash would, for Miss Nash thinks her own sister very well married, and is only a linen draper. One should be sorry to see a greater pride or refinement in the teacher of a school, Harriet. I dare say Miss Nash would envy you such an opportunity as this of being married. Even this conquest would appear valuable in her eyes. As to anything superior for you, I suppose she is quite in the dark. The attentions of a certain person can hardly be among the tittle-tattle of Highbury yet. Hitherto I fancy you and I are the only people to whom his looks and manners have explained themselves." Harriet blushed and smiled, and said something about wondering that people should like her so much. The idea of Mr. Elton was certainly cheering, but still, after a time, she was tender-hearted again toward the rejected Mr. Martin. "Now he has got my letter," she said softly. "I wonder what they are doing, whether his sisters know if he is unhappy. They will be unhappy too. I hope he will not mind it so very much." "Let us think of those things among our absent friends who are more cheerfully employed," cried Emma. "At this moment, perhaps Mr. Elton is shewing your picture to his mother and sisters, and telling how much more beautiful is the original, and after being asked for it 5 or 6 times, allowing them to hear your name, your own dear name. My picture, but he's left my picture in Bond Street." "Has he so? Then I know nothing of Mr. Elton. No, my dear little modest Harriet, depending on the picture, will not be at Bond Street till just before he mounts his horse tomorrow, and in its companion all this evening. His solace, his delight, it opens his designs to his family, it introduces you among them, it diffuses through the party those pleasantest feelings of our own nature, eager curiosity and warm prepossession. How cheerful, how animated, how suspicious, how busy their imaginations all are." Harriet smiled again, and her smiles grew stronger.